Friends, the plant kingdom can be a very lovely, very beautiful, yet very deadly place. And I'm going to invite you into my garden because guess what? I play with a lot of deadly plants. So come along with me. I'm going to show you some of my favorite killers. Friends, I'm going to go through this in kind of a lighthearted way, but at the end of the day, this is simply a starting place. I am not going to show you every toxic plant on the planet. I'm going to show you what I have in my garden and what I've played with for many years. This is an encouragement for you to research the plants in your own garden, get to know them, get to love them, and figure out what is best for you and be your own best advocate in the garden. Okay, are we ready? Let's do it. Friends, I would like to introduce you to one of the most deadly, and I do mean deadly plants, in my garden. It is this lovely yew hedge. Now, the Irish yew, the botanical name is Taxus. What's really interesting about this plant is literally every single piece of it is deadly, except for in the wintertime, they'll develop these sweet little red berries. The flesh, that red flesh that surrounds the seed inside, that one will not kill you, but in the seed inside of it, absolutely will. What's really interesting is the botanical name is Taxus, and the toxin that is fatal that this plant produces is called taxine. So, all that to say, this is an insanely deadly hedge, but luckily for me, my kids, my family, we all know better. No one's gonna come munching along this thing. It is absolutely deadly, and I absolutely love it. And it's one of my favorite hedging plants of all time. I would like to introduce you to my next deadly plant in my garden. Now, it's not in bloom right now, but you can see the buds emerging here, here, and here. And this is a plant called Datura. Its common name is devil's vine. It is also related to angel trumpet vine. Now, this has the most sensational blooms. I will pop a picture of the flower up on screen because I don't have it blooming here. However, all parts of this plant are extremely toxic. So whenever you see me working with this plant in my garden, I'm going to be sanitizing my tools after I touch this. I'm never going to be transferring this and using the same tool in my edible beds because literally all parts of this are toxic, especially the flowers and the seeds. It is known to cause arrhythmia, respiratory depression. It can also be very psychoactive and not in a cool way. So literally, you guys, very, very dangerous, very deadly, but also so stinking gorgeous. You cannot replicate the blooms that you see on this gorgeous plant and its sister plant, angel trumpet vine. Friends, our next poisonous plant is this gorgeous beauty, which funny enough, she's still kicking out a couple blooms. But this is Wisteria. This is another one that people love and they freak out over. And most people don't know that this is actually toxic. So Wisteria is poisonous to humans, animals, specifically chickens, which is really funny. But what's really interesting about this plant is this is another one like the Taxus, the Irish yew, that has a toxin that is almost named after this plant. It's called Wisteria. It also has a toxin called lectin. So friends, while the entire plant here is poisonous, possibly the most toxic part of the plant is the seed pods because those seeds contain the highest levels of that lectin and Wisteria and can be severely toxic if ingested, even just 2 tiny seeds. So another gorgeous plant that is all throughout many, many gardens, yet shockingly poisonous. This next flower is one that so many people love, and maybe you know it too, but this is our daffodil. Now, all parts of the daffodil are poisonous. Obviously, mine are not flowering. These ones I have dried and I'm getting ready to put in my front border. However, it's really important to talk these things through because a lot of people don't realize how poisonous these actually are. So the daffodil contains a toxin called licerine, and the highest concentration can be found in the bulb itself, although the leaves, the stem, the flower, all of it contains this toxin. So this is actually obviously not in bloom. I'm getting ready to plant it out in the front garden. Eating any part of the daffodil can be poisonous, which funny enough is also one of the reasons that I love it because my bunnies and the deer population leave it alone. They are not interested in this little bad boy because it is totally toxic to them as well. The other interesting thing about the daffodil is it contains something called an oxalate. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it can cause a lot of like burning sensations and can cause contact dermatitis. So all that to say, our friendly, happy little daffodil is actually totally a killer. So friends, this next one may be a shocker. It is our beloved hydrangea. Now, most people have hydrangeas in their garden. Most gardeners love this and use it quite frequently, but literally every single part of this is toxic. So we were talking flower, the buds, the leaves, the stems, every part of it is toxic, and it actually contains trace amounts of, crazy enough, cyanide. So if ingested in small amounts, it absolutely will cause stomach upset, all sorts of gastro issues, shortness of breath, leading up to actually cyanide poisoning the system and death. So hydrangea, she is absolutely lovely. She's covered in bees. I love her endlessly, but she is a killer. This next one is Euphoria. Now here I've used one called Diamond Frost. I will show you a couple others that you will commonly see in the garden. It's called Spurge. Now here's the scoop. Will this kill you? Probably not. But what I think is actually the most harmful of this is the sap. The sap can cause severe contact dermatitis. The other thing is the sap, if you get it in your eye, can be extremely harmful to your eyesight, up to and including loss of eyesight. So I'm including this one here because this, for me, funny enough, is more of a danger in the garden than most of these other ones that I have already listed. This one I think is the most particularly dangerous because it is really easy to break it off, and the milky sap that is emitted gets everywhere. As a side note, as a caveat, if you have a family with small children that are roaming around your garden, this is one that I just simply would not include because they are more likely to break off a piece of this and come in contact with the sap than they will to ever ingest this, from my experience. So Euphoria, this is a hard pass for me in a family with young children. Friends, I wanted to show you another example of a euphorbia. This is another like icy blue euphorbia, very common, self-seeds all over gardens. And this one, again, it has that really milky, deadly sap that can cause contact dermatitis. You don't want it in your eye. That is like the most dangerous thing about this plant. So again, if you see this, if you've just moved into your home, I would get rid of it if you have small children, because if anything, they were probably like my kids. They wouldn't be eating stuff, but they would be going through the garden and potentially break this off and get that sap on their face, their skin, potentially their eyes. Totally dangerous. This is another type of euphorbia, just commonly referenced by the name Spurge. Again, this particular one is actually super invasive in the garden. I pull it out all the time, and this one is another one that you do not want in your life. And again, milky sap. Whenever you see it, it is no good. This next one is dedicated to all of you animal lovers out there, specifically my cat parent friends. This is a lily, and lilies, as well as like the traditional lily, as well as hemerocallis. So think like Stella de Oro, those are your daylily varieties. All of these are severely toxic to cats. You'll find kind of mixed information online in terms of if it's poisonous to people and dogs. But the reason I mention this is because a lot of us receive floral bouquets that will contain a lily because they smell absolutely lovely. But as a former cat parent, I would encourage all of you to pluck out those lilies and maybe keep them in a bathroom or another room where your cat usually doesn't go, because if ingested, this can be severely toxic to cats, leading up to their demise, which is just too sad for words. So the lily, she's a no-no. Keep her in your garden, not in your house. Okay, out on our walk, and look at this incredible stand of lilies. And this is what I'm talking about. This thing is so gorgeous. I would never sacrifice this just because it's poisonous. I'd rather educate my family and any people who happen to stop by, because look at this impact. absolutely incredible. I actually don't have any of this next plant growing in my garden. However, I am gonna order seeds because I love it. This is Foxglove, and I feel like Foxglove is like the grand poobah of carrying that bad rap of being toxic, and it should, because literally all parts of this are deadly poisonous to humans. So we are talking the stem, the leaves, the seeds, the whole nine. However, is this also totally beautiful? Yes, and in fact, I think I want to grow some apricot beauty, and there's a one called, I think, Cafe Creme. Anyways, I absolutely adore it, and I have grown it for years and years and years, never with any issue, because my kids and everyone else in my family knows that this bad ride is totally toxic. All right, on to the next. So I am out on a walk for this next one because I actually don't have one of these beautiful plants in my current garden. This is a beautiful rhododendron. Rhododendrons, as well as azaleas, are extremely, extremely toxic. Now, the rhododendron specifically has, and azalea have something called granotoxins, and those are most frequently found in the leaves as well as the flowers. What's interesting is it's one of the plant's natural defenses against herbivores who would graze on something like this. Now, what's really interesting is the rhododendron is our state flower here in Washington, so you find them all over the place, and it's certainly, the toxicity in them would never prevent me from planting this in my garden, but it is something to be considered. So rhododendrons and azaleas, both totally extremely toxic and lovely. The next one is actually kind of a surprising one to me, but it's one worth noting. It's one of my favorite woodland flowers. It grows all over the place and naturally self-seeds. It is columbine. Now, columbine, while it's not deadly to most, it is extremely toxic. Ingesting any part of this flower and the plant itself can lead to a wide range of gastrointestinal distress. So the typical nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. But the other thing is it can actually cause excessive drooling. And this is both in, like, say, people and children as well as pets. So it is something to have on your radar because it's gorgeous, but it is super duper toxic. So friends, we've gone over a wide array of plants that are super toxic and potentially deadly for you and those that you love. However, I don't want that to scare you off completely. Some of the most beautiful plants in our plant kingdom are poisonous and, quite frankly, deadly. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We've got gorgeous things like delphiniums, for example. And what would my life in a cut flower garden be without these beautiful additions? So, to help you kind of learn how to work with these plants, I have a couple of things that I usually recommend to people. So first and foremost, it's keeping things separated. And you have seen me do this in some of my container maintenance videos. I'll include a link to that below. But here we go. I've got 2 pairs of snips. Now, my Felcos, this is what I use on the day-to-day around all of my ornamental plants. These are my ornamental go-tos. They're heavy duty. I use them for everything. I know where they go. These little drams, on the other hand, this is something that I use with my edible plants. Now, the reason that I use 2 different sets here is just to keep it more simple in my brain. I know that if I'm in veggies, I'm using these. If I'm in ornamentals, I'm using these bad boys. So that is your first step to working with poisonous plants and keeping you safe. So now let's say you are a 1 snip person. You got your Felcos, and that is really about it, and that's what you want to use throughout your garden, and you don't want to buy a second pair. Well, in that case, you are going to disinfect this between every ornamental and edible usage. Here is what I mean. You are either going to wash this with copious amounts of soap and very hot water to make sure that these are disinfected. You could also take, say, like a cotton pad or like a little cotton bud, and you are going to disinfect these with something like isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol. That is going to make sure that you are staying safe in the garden. Now, the second thing, I did talk about contact dermatitis. Basically, that is sap on the skin that causes massive irritation. So you've got a couple of different things with that. Number one, use a great pair of garden gloves. But also within that, you can use disposable gloves. Now, typically, I'm not a big proponent of disposable. However, if you have very sensitive skin and you know you're going to be using one of these plants that has incredibly toxic sap, I would recommend it. The other thing is protecting your skin. So if you are working with poisonous plants, you are working with something that has a terrible sap on it and you get it on your clothing, I don't want you to throw that in with your normal wash. You're going to wash that clothing. You're going to wash whatever garment you were wearing separately with loads and loads of detergent and a great rinse, okay? Last but not least is a PSA to everyone out there. Really, when it comes to working with poisonous plants, your own knowledge of your garden is your best defense. And we shouldn't be afraid of including these beautiful plants in our home garden. I've just covered the ones that I commonly see in my garden and the garden of those around me. And more than anything, this video, I hope, gives you information and dispels a little bit of fear around working with toxic plants. As with all gardening, this is your garden, it is your program. If you don't feel comfortable with them, don't use them. If you do feel comfortable, amazing. But again, it is your garden and your choice. Okay, my friends, thanks for joining me. I'm gonna see you in the next one. And in the meantime, go say hello to your garden for me.